A reading from What If It's Wonderful? Release your fears, choose joy, and find the courage to celebrate. Since the beginning of summer, we have held a Saturday night tradition of making s'mores at the fire pit in our front yard. We provide refreshments, s'mores fixings, and lawn games. Sometimes I add large bowls of freshly picked berries that stain our fingers red and purple, sugar snap peas from our latest farmer's market haul, or buckets of fuzzy peaches. No one is invited, and everyone is invited. What I mean is, there is no specific guest list or calls made telling people to come over at a specific time. But neighbors, friends of neighbors who are visiting from out of town, or anyone who happens to be passing by on their walking route is invited to our weekly front yard party. Some quickly grab a drink before proceeding with their walk. Others find their way to one of the Adirondack chairs surrounding our fire pit, and they share their stories, chatting and laughing with us and watching the fire's embers twirl toward the stars. As we finish preparing our front yard, unsure of what this evening celebration will look like exactly, one neighbor, an elderly man, passes by with his golden retriever. The man slows his pace and says, "Hi, what are you celebrating?" We are well rehearsed with this question. Sometimes we say, "Summer," "Saturday." But today, as we answer most often, we say, "You." In the early days of this Saturday night tradition, the group that gathered was small, sometimes just Jimmy and me. It looked like we had prepared the festivities for a party that never materialized. But after several weeks, our front yard fire pit gathering turned into a celebration people have begun to anticipate. Some of our neighbors talk about the gathering and plan it throughout the week. And I've even noticed a few walkers from other parts of town intentionally shift their routes to more consistently include our house on Saturday evening. Maybe they like the free sparkling water, but I think it's the fellowship and the festivity of the ordinary that they crave and have come to count on each Saturday. I have grown dependent on this excitement too. "So why are you doing this every week?" the man asks. "Because celebration is changing everything for me," I say. These are words you would not have heard from me even a few years ago. Frankly, the idea of celebrating terrified me. Like so many others I had known, clients I had seen in my therapy practice, friends, family members who had experienced prolonged seasons of hurt and disappointment, I had become highly suspicious of joy, afraid to hold God's good gifts for fear that they would be snatched away. I was sure that celebration always comes with a catch. So I became practiced in praying for the miracle while preparing to mourn. But I was beginning to understand that this perspective was costly. I realized that much of the loss I had experienced in my life was not only the grief and disappointment itself, but also the joy I overlooked because I was too afraid to embrace it. I was missing out on delight in the present moment because I dreaded the pain I imagined the future would bring. I neglected connection in relationships because too often I chose projects over people. And I was missing the enduring joy of deepening my relationship with God, often distracted with expecting more thrill from earthly victories, opportunities, and gifts than they were meant to give. Heartlifters, today we welcome back for part 2, reimagining our what if scenarios. We welcome back Nicole Zaskowski, the author of this amazing book, What If It Is Wonderful? Part 1 was enriching, enlivening, engaging, and I took away several things. And I began asking myself the question that she brought up in part 1. So I'm going to offer it to you today, and I want you to hold it just really close. What if I blank and I'm disappointed? Then she added, what if I blank and it is wonderful? And then along with those two questions, I have held so closely this one thing that Nicole said. She had a suspicion of joy. Because what if it's just too good to be true? What if? So then I asked myself one final question. Janell, is there a refusal of joy in your life? So I ask you today to just hold these things as we welcome Nicole back.
Sometimes the story we tell ourselves is not really true. Sometimes the story others tell about us is not really true. Here on today's Heartlift with Janell, we are going to learn how to rewrite our story. So pick up your favorite pen and journal, grab a cup of something delicious, and start your heart-lifting journey towards living a meaningful life.
It is a defense for sure.
Totally.
Yeah, totally. I really want to sit here for a minute because I just feel like it isn't something that we've really talked about a lot on the show here. And I love that I've never heard of. This is what I love about life. And I love about the field we're in. There is always something I have not heard of, and I have not heard of restoration therapy. Could you just explain that just a bit, if you wouldn't mind? Okay.
Yeah, it's a newer model. It was actually started by my mentor in graduate school. So I was privileged to learn from the man himself. And he mentored me for 10 years. So,
and what is his name?
Dr. Terry Hargrave.
Okay.
And so a lot of what I've explained so far is actually in that context. So when we experience pain, it either informs our identity or sense of safety. And so you and I could go through the same thing tomorrow, the same painful event, and I might feel not good enough and worthless, and you might feel out of control and powerless. And those are just examples.
No, that's so good. It's so good.
And the reason for that is you and I have both lived different stories.
We have, yes.
That have shaped the wounds that we carry. So I also give the analogy, if I have a broken arm and you have a broken leg and we both fall, you're going to feel it in your leg and I'm going to feel it in my arm because that's where our previous injuries are.
That's so good.
So actually a lot of the emotional pain that we feel has less to do with the current trigger and more to do with the wounds that we're carrying around. So
it's very trauma informed. Yeah,
Yep.
It is.
Yep. So you and I, or anybody, is probably feeling the same 3 or 4 painful feelings every time they go through something painful.
Okay.
And it may not even make logical sense to the situation. So if you and I were a part of a conversation around lunch with maybe some other women.
Oh, that'd be great.
That
so
would be great.
Would that not be great? Would that not be great? Can we make that happen? Oh my gosh.
I would love that.
And I feel a contest coming on. Yeah.
There you go.
Have lunch with us.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe a woman makes a comment and it maybe it doesn't land on me at all. And maybe it grazes one of your wounds.
Yes.
And I might need to understand, well, tell me what that comment, how that landed on you and why did it touch that wound? So all that to say,
that's so good,
less
Nicole.
About the thing and more about our stories. And then in turn, we all have ways of protecting ourselves that are totally understandable, but not very helpful.
No, and not very healthy.
And what was once a needed shield becomes a barrier to connection as an adult.
Is that line in one of your books? Because that's a good sentence.
Yeah, it's actually in the first one.
That's a really great sentence. I love sentences.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. And I think we need to have compassion on that child that needed that to survive. And we are responsible for as adults growing into a place where we can tell our defenses to stand down and
Yes.
own the truth and make that action. So
yeah, that sounds a lot like we've had the privilege of talking about internal family systems on the show. So it does. Yeah, I learned a lot through that myself about, okay, that I did need it as my shield, as your language just so brilliantly spoke to us. But now it is a barrier to joy.
Yeah.
To celebration. Yeah. Can I read something from your book? Would you mind?
Please.
Okay. Oh my goodness. This is so good. So this is from page 37. It's from chapter 4, Protective Pessimism. Pessimism is more than simply a neuroscience phenomenon for me. This is you writing. It is a trusted guard against pain. I really know how this is going to resonate. This is so important. I stare into the future and believe the worst will surely happen. What a placement of an adverb there. I rehearse disappointment, which you've said, in an attempt to prepare me for what I believe to be inevitable pain. Too often, I've let my brain convince me that it is helpful to practice the potential pain instead of training it towards hopeful imagination. Okay, hold on to that. When confronted with possibility or opportunity, here is, I want to break through this today. Like, I want to break through it in my own life, and I want us all to break through this. When confronted with possibility or opportunity or success even, or sheer joy, delight, happiness, my first thought following any momentary excitement is often, you fill it in. You remember?
I don't actually.
It will be terrible. It will be terrible. And all I see is evidence that supports my theory that what I hope for will not turn out well. What is that all about? What have you gleaned from this journey? Probably through weeping, and I call it the puddle on the floor time. You know, what are you bringing forth from that? Like, that is such a birth experience to me. And, you know, it's after the transition of such pain.
Yeah. I think for a long time, it was easier not to hold joy than to try and hold something that might break in my hands. And yet, after I realized I was missing out on so much, I started exploring celebration and what scripture had to say about celebration.
Beautiful.
And what the neuroscience had to say about joy and celebration. And I realized that my view was so narrow. And I was considering celebration to be a reaction to a good outcome instead of a rhythm that I practice.
Oh, say that again. You're so good. Oh my goodness. Instead of considering it a
reaction to a good outcome, which is how we typically think of it, or reward, that it's actually a rhythm that we practice to cultivate joy. And at first I was, to be honest with you, so irritated that celebration.
So sorry, I get it. I'm sorry.
It was like, gosh darn it.
Yeah.
This is not what I wanted the research to say.
No.
Because we so want to have a reason to celebrate.
We do.
We want the obvious, dream realized, goal achieved, shift in our circumstances.
And we train it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
You go ahead.
And then the natural celebration to follow that. And I was annoyed that celebration had to be a discipline too. I thought, isn't there enough things in life that require practice, that don't come naturally, that, require discipline to cultivate in our lives? And then I realized how empowering that was and how disempowering it is to treat it like a reward. I used to get super anxious around New Year's. Like it would make me want to hide under the covers and ignore the whole month of January with all this talk about goal setting and dreaming and vision casting. It just gave me hives. And I realized it was because my celebration was so contingent on my circumstances.
On outcome.
Yeah. That I would walk into a new year or some sort of transition or new season and think, well, I hope I have a reason to celebrate this year or this season and it was incredibly empowering to say, no, this is something I can practice today.
Okay.
In a season of joy or a season of suffering, this is available to me now.
How so? Like how so? What does that look like?
Yes. So this was super important to me in writing What If It's Wonderful. The last third is mostly around practices. I wanted
it is. I'm so happy.
Readers to walk away with whether you're coming to this book in a season of sorrow, because I know life is hard already. And I know life has been really hard these last couple of years.
It has. It's not lifting either, which is what we, I think we're all of our expectations now. We're disappointed because it isn't lifting.
Exactly.
And now we have affects of it.
Yep.
And now there is a war and there are, right. So
all the things.
All the things.
And I really wanted, no matter what kind of season you're walking, I wanted those practices to be available. I didn't want anybody to be disqualified from them.
I love that.
So I can name a few of them.
I have them right here, but you please read part 3. Find the courage to celebrate. It is so rich and practical.
Yes.
And takeaway. Thank you, licensed marriage and family therapist.
You're
or
so
giving
welcome.
us nuts and bolts, and giving us meat on the bones that we can walk away and actually know I've got to find. It's like a treasure hunt. Somewhere in this suffering. We talk so much here about holding joy and holding sorrow at the same time.
Yeah.
If my journey with my daughter-in-law, my son, has taught me so much of that, just holding joy and sorrow at the same time, what a hard journey that is. Okay. So tell us what these rhythms and these practices are.
Yes.
We're ready.
So my favorite one, or if it's kind of like picking your favorite child, I love them all, but my favorite place to start is a practice called savoring.
Yes, I have it right here. Let's talk about practice savory.
Good. So savoring, what this does is it celebrates the ordinary. And to appreciate the necessity of this, we have to understand a few things about the brain.
Okay.
Because left on neutral, the brain sadly leans negative.
It does.
So there's this thing called the hedonic treadmill going on in our brain, which means it rapidly adapts to joy. So what's new and exciting and maybe the gift that you thought would make you want for nothing else in the world quickly fades into the background and becomes somewhat normal. And then, as we've probably discussed before on here, the brain is stickier with negative and full input.
So sticky.
Yep. All those pleasant, joyful, everyday moments of delight. Your brain is largely going to scan past and not see as something that it needs to hang on to.
Yeah.
And then finally, we have this habit of telling our joy how it can be improved upon.
Oh,
so say you finished a presentation at work, or you shared a talk at your church, and you sit down and you feel really good about what you shared. Some people said some nice things on your way to your seat. And then you start thinking, ooh, it would have been better if I said this.
Without a doubt.
or they said I was a good speaker, but they didn't say I was a great speaker.
That's ouch, 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 ouch.
Yes. So this is our starting place when it comes to joy and celebration. And I say that when I talk about savoring, because savoring is our way of counteracting that and retraining our brain, building those new neural pathways.
That's it.
And the way that we do this is we ask our 5 traditional senses what they're going to remember about a moment. So I love when this can be practiced in the moment, like you're experiencing a moment in the present and you take a mental snapshot, but it can also be practiced as you reflect on your day and you just take one snapshot. Doesn't mean
I love that.
The whole day, doesn't mean the whole day or even the whole moment had to be perfect. Just one little element that you want to keep. And you just say, what am I seeing? What am I smelling? What am I hearing? What am I tasting? And what am I feeling? And that reserves it in your brain and allows you to keep it and carry it forward to be recalled later as a moment of joy.
It's so beautiful.
Great technique if you're anxious. Like I am, because your brain loves to pull you into the future and give you a tour of all the things that could go wrong when you're anxious, or pull you into the past and tell you what you shoulda, coulda, woulda done differently.
Exactly.
But this keeps you really in the present.
Yep.
Where your brain can calm down. So
I think that's the challenge of life. I don't know about you and your practice, Nicole, or just I know in your own life, you're sharing from your own life. I know that practicing, being here now, being in the moment, mindfulness, watchfulness, whatever you want to call it, grounding, is the greatest challenge in the world. We're just not right now kind of people in the sense of what's going on around me right now.
Yeah.
I mean, daffodils are blooming. And they're just so beautiful. And I just wonder who has stopped to cut a few and put them on their desk or on the kitchen counter. And, yesterday I was sitting at my desk and I got this waft of fragrance and I was like, I work with a lot of essential oils. I'm like, what oil is that? That is not. And then I was like, oh, that's not an oil. That's my daffodil. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know they had that beautiful smell. I mean, I should know that.
Yeah.
But right at that moment. So I think that's what you're talking about. And I know that the studies that about joy are completely and totally linked to gratitude, that if you just begin to practice gratitude, you will start to experience joy. Like you really can't have one without the other.
Yes. And that is a perfect entree into my other favorite practice.
Okay, go. I'm so excited.
Which is the practice of Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. Gratitude, the research is clear. It does increase our joy because it helps us notice and name what is good. So as we're noticing, we're scanning our day for what is good in our lives, and naming it helps us put structure around it.
So good.
In a way that we can capture it.
Yeah.
What we don't often talk about is the research also says that Thanksgiving, actually expressing the gratitude that we feel, doubles the joy that we glean from gratitude. So actually sharing with the people in our lives, this is the difference that you make in my life because you're in it. And here's how I've learned and grown from you. And here's all the reasons you make my life better because you're in it. Not only will that hopefully give joy to the receiver of those words, but it will double your joy as if, and versus if you had simply kept that in your heart and simply felt it. Now there's benefit there. And it is a vulnerable experience to share. In fact, I was, talking about this with a woman earlier today, and she burst into tears because of how scary that felt. And she could recognize how good it was and how beautiful that moment would be and how terrifying that was to her.
To share something about something, share healing words, speak healing words to someone else and encourage them.
Yeah, to express, because we started the conversation by talking about how vulnerable joy was just as a feeling.
Right.
And here we are actually sharing that joy to be received by somebody else. And that heightens the vulnerability too. But
it does.
It's the avenue we've been given to celebrate the gift with the giver. And whether it's in your prayers or another person in your life, I have loved challenging myself when I feel grateful to actually express it through thankfulness. And it's made such a difference in my joy.
I love it. You encourage us. One of the rhythms and rituals that you tell us to practice is to write thank you notes.
Yep.
And so I think when we write things down, that's once again part of the journey in our brain. It actually has more affect on us, and it gets wired differently. Yes. So I love that you tell us, and you say to write them, or text.
Write them, and if you can, and if you can, some people feel more comfortable writing it first and then reading that to the person.
Yes.
Or, share the essence of what's in the note. But where I talk about keep the thank you notes is that became a catchphrase between my mentor and I, because his wife said, I tell Terry that he gets all these thank you notes from students over the years, and there's no place to keep them. So years later, he got one of the biggest awards you can get in our field. It was a major, major award in marriage and family therapy. And so there was this huge ceremony and a reception afterward.
Oh, how beautiful. Wow.
And I gave him a box, a wooden box, and on the top was engraved, keep the thank you note.
Oh my gosh, I want that. I want one.
I know. I think we all need one. We all need.
I think so.
To collect that affirmation.
For the rainy days, man. For the storms. For the puddle on the floor days.
Yes. Yes. To remind ourselves, okay, I have been called to this work and I have made a difference. And even on a day when I question why.
Yes. And more particularly on the days.
Yes.
When we question why, for sure.
Yeah. It's so valuable to have that collection of gratitude and thankfulness. And that's another way that we can practice celebration is to receive affirmation.
Yes.
Talk about
receive well. Yeah.
Experience.
It is. It's a very, very vulnerable for me. I hate it.
Yeah.
That's my word for the year is receive.
Yeah.
I was like,
really?
Oh no.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Why are you giving me that word? God, you know how much I hate to receive. So uncomfortable. Yes.
It is. And how often do we deflect, you should ask my husband what he thinks, or, we're sarcastic, or you're just being sweet, or
that's right. What do you want from me?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So being able to just say some form of thank you, I received that.
Yeah. Put it in your pocket. Hold it for a day. Say thank you. Yeah. That's a good practice. Okay. So I've kept you a long time. I want to get through these other ones. Be expectant. Now I find that one extremely challenging with what you have shared with us today. So I do want to just hear just a teeny bit, like, here you have so many multiple miscarriages, Nicole. That word expectant is a big word.
Yeah. Tell
me.
And I used to kind of picture like hands on hip, foot tapping, like, I like a demanding picture.
Right.
But I learned more and realized it's more about holding hope and letting your imagination wander to what is possible. And again, here, I think it's more about, is my hope contingent on a certain outcome? Is my joy contingent on a certain outcome?
That's
Certainly,
so
we're going to have desires and hopes. And we are humans living in a broken world. Paying attention, and our hearts are breaking. Like this isn't about not feeling pain in response to something painful. That we can't protect ourselves from that, nor should we try.
Right.
But there were two stories in scripture that were really helpful to me in distinguishing the difference.
Oh, tell me.
One was a character that is not a major character in the Bible, but Herod Antipas. And he was so excited to meet Jesus because he had plans, and Jesus was going to be the power to his plans, like a magician. And so his views of God, his views of his worship and awe of God were contingent upon what God could do for him.
Yeah. Wow.
And of course, Jesus did not cooperate with his plans.
No, not at all.
And Herod rejected Jesus immediately because his hope was more invested in the power to his plans than in the power and joy of Jesus himself.
Yes.
And then we have Daniel as our counter example. And of course, Daniel longed for God's protection and had a clear desire for what the outcome would be. And, he knew that God could. He trusted God's character and knew God was capable. And he believed that he would. He prayed with an expectant heart. Like, Lord,
three times a day.
Yeah.
In front of the window.
That you're going to move in my situation, and I'm trusting that you will. And even if you don't, you're still the same God to me. And that, brilliant. I love that because it makes it a good idea to hope.
It does. That's good, Nicole. It's super good.
It's safe to dream with that perspective. And so I rest in that. And that is when I have a strong desire of my heart, I bring that before the Lord.
That's so good.
On this book launch day, I'm thinking to myself, that would be a good prayer for this book.
It's really an amazing day to have you on, because I know all of the feels of a book launch day, and for listeners who you can relate, just a big day that you've had planned. Your dreams coming true. You're bringing a baby into the world. For us, it would be a book or whatever. But it's any time you have hope invested in something, right? Yeah. And I think that you've made a true clarification that we can begin to really take to heart and meditate on. And especially, we're taping this in the Lenten season, where we are making our way, to the cross at Calvary. And the clarification being that we can't be attached to the outcomes.
Right.
We can't be attached to the answered prayer. We can't be attached to anything other than Jesus.
Yes.
Other than what he did for us on the cross. We just can't be. Yet we're so prone to be.
Yes. He is where the joy is. And I think a lot of my disappointment, to be honest, again, we're not robots. We're going to feel disappointment robots. When something doesn't go the way we hoped. But the level of disappointment and devastation I have felt around a lot of what's occurred in my life has also been expecting more joy from the gift than it was meant to give. And I think that speaks to what you're gracious. Saying. Because what sits at the center of our affection is going to determine the satiation of our joy. And if anything other than Jesus is at the center, the joy will flake off and we will be disappointed to some degree.
We will. But I think I just want to leave us there. I would like to leave us with these words. This is in your study guide that I got because I was pre-ordered your book, but you probably still can get this, I'm sure. Yes. And it's on page 2 of your study guide. And it says, what has your pain cost you? The stories I tell myself about what the future will look like, the stories that attempted to warn me that joy is dangerous and would leave me hurt, were draining the delight out of my days. And I just really want to leave everyone. I hope and I pray that everyone picks up this book via Kindle or whatever. And Nicole, that you have left us today with much food for thought. This is a podcast episode or 2 maybe broken into two, because there are some really deep truths that if I have your permission, I would love to maybe mine them and have some teaching moments built into our podcast episodes, because I think that we have so many, if not all of us, attach to outcome, and we attach to the gift bringing us more joy than it really merits. And I mean, that just speaks so deeply to my own soul today. And that if I'm looking to anything other than my deep, intimate relationship with the Trinity to really satiate me, you brought that word into the conversation that I love. I love the word satiate. I mean, Jesus was so clear when he said, I give you rivers of living water, and they're filled with filled, everything we need to really live a life of eudaimonia, which is a meaningful life filled with struggle and pain and pleasure. So I pray for everyone that's listening today that they will heed your wisdom and they will take it to a quiet place, and that they will hunt what I call go on the hunt for everyday epiphanies.
Yes.
Where they savor, and I call it sit and savor, saunter, sit and savor is how I framed it in my book, because Thoreau had a beautiful quote on sauntering. And so any closing thoughts from you that you would like to leave us with? You have left us with so many.
Oh, well, when I talk about this, occasionally I'll have a reader or a listener reach out to me and say, do you think I need to demonstrate a certain level of hope or an expectant heart before Jesus is willing to intervene?
Ooh.
And I love the honesty and vulnerability in that question, because in this conversation about celebration, I think we can overlay our issues with performance or our thoughts about God onto this conversation. And I just want to assure anybody listening that God's faithfulness to you does not depend on your faith.
It does not.
And his goodness is not a function of your goodness.
No.
There's simply so much joy available to us when we trust God at his word and we trust what is possible with God.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And if I could add to that, because just this morning I had an intensive with someone, and literally one of the most, just a beautiful woman who follows Jesus with all of her heart. Yet she was, shoulding and woulding and coulding and, what am I doing wrong? What am I not doing? Why is God being silent? Why am I not hearing God? And I hear that all the time. I've spoken that. And I think that you have brought us to understand that what I concluded in my own recent journey is that I still don't know and believe the depths of love that God has for me. 1 John 4:7-21, verse 16 says, I know and believe the love that God has for me. And when I read that in a puddle on the floor a few weeks ago, I went, oh no, oh dear, I don't know that. Because if I really knew that, because you can go a couple verses later and it says perfect love casts out all fear. And so I think we're all really still journeying towards understanding the depths and breadths of love, the heights, the length, all the love that this merciful, gracious, loving God has for us.
I love that.
And as we embrace that, then the shame will shift into the beautiful grace that I think he wants us all to embrace. So thank you, Nicole.
Amen.
Many blessings on your books, many blessings on your life, and may you just enjoy, celebrate the fact that you brought these wise words into the world today.
Thank you, friend.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening today. It was great having you here. For even more great content and resources, please join the Stronger Everyday online community at janellreardon.com. Always remember, you, my friend, have value, worth, and dignity.